Notre Dame's linebackers are one of the most inexperienced units on the entire roster, and yet it's their potential that has fans so excited about what this group could accomplish in 2024. All that and more on today's edition of Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, and welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. And today is Wednesday, August 14th, and thank you for making this your first listen of the day. I'm Tyler Wojciak, and I'm the host. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018, and now I'm a producer at Fox Sports. And I appreciate you joining me here today. As always, you can watch the show on YouTube, or you can listen on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. For those of you watching on YouTube, remember to like the video and subscribe, or if you're listening to the podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe there as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Folks, we are just 17 days away from Notre Dame's season opener against Texas A&M, and with each passing day, it seems like all the different emotions circulating amongst the fan base are heightened. Personally, I know that I am super excited, but I'm also incredibly nervous and anxious about what this season is going to bring because this group has the potential to be great. There's no doubt about that, but there are still so many questions that will be answered soon enough, and I don't think there's a position on the entire roster that embodies that more than the linebackers. So today, we've got another installment of the position preview series ahead of the start of the season, and the focus today is going to be all about the linebackers. And for the last couple of years, we knew exactly what we were going to get out of Notre Dame's linebacker unit. J.D. Bertrand and Maris Leofau were going to be productive. They were rarely ever going to come off the field. And then when a guy like Jack Kaiser came in, he got his opportunity to make some plays. He was going to do just that. But this year, it's basically the complete opposite of what we have seen for the past few years. Jack Kaiser is going to be the one on the field the most, and now there are four other, mostly younger guys who are also a little bit inexperienced, but they are chomping at the bit to get out there, make some plays, and bring a different level of athleticism to this position unit. Notre Dame linebackers coach Max Bullough made it abundantly clear to the media this week that Notre Dame is going to rotate 5 guys at the position routinely. Tyler Horker from Blue and Gold put out a great tweet from Max's press conference when he said, quote, "We are not doing ones and twos. Ones and twos is an effing practice thing. We are getting ready to play a game, and I can't wait to do it." End quote. That was Max referring to the 5-man rotation, and I think that it's a little bit fair to be, not concerned per se, but have some questions about how a 5-man rotation is going to work at a position where more often than not, there's only going to be 2 guys on the field at that time. Because technically Notre Dame does have a 4-3 base defense with 4 defensive linemen, 3 linebackers, and then 4 defensive backs. But as we know, and as college football has evolved over the past decade plus really, and it's become more spread out. The passing game has become the focal point of the offense. Teams run more wide receivers out there, which means teams often play nickel or dime defenses, which brings more defensive backs on the field. And when you bring more defensive backs on the field, it usually means less linebackers. So more often than not, Notre Dame is going to be in a 4-2-5 defense with just 2 linebackers on the field. So how are you going to rotate 5 guys when there's only going to be 2 linebacker spots out in the field? And we know that one of those spots is going to belong to Jack Kaiser, and he's rarely going to come off the field. Well, it's a fair question and one that we're going to look at intently today. So I think the way that they're going to do it is they're basically going to assign different roles for every single one of these 5 guys. Jack Kaiser is going to be the captain of the defense. He's going to be out there to make sure that everyone is where they need to be. That includes the defensive line, the linebackers, and the defensive back. He's going to be a 6th-year senior, his 3rd year in Al Golden scheme. This guy knows the playbook like the back of his hand, and he is going to be the vocal leader out there when he's on the field. But as we've said before, Jack Kaiser is also extremely productive. So he's not just a coach out there. He's going to be making some plays as well. Then there's Jalen Steed. He is great at pressuring the quarterback. That is one thing that he's been good at since the moment he arrived on campus. But he's also shown great improvement in coverage, and that's great because he's an elite athlete. If he can get out there and make some plays in the open field, that really bodes well for the defense and brings them a new dynamic piece that they can move around. Drake Bowen, Kingston Viliamu-Asa, they're true Mike linebackers. They're going to play most of their time in the middle, but they can move around as well. I think KVA is going to be a force getting after the quarterback. He might be coming off the edge, but still, I think their main priority is going to be in the middle of that defense at the Mike linebacker position. And then you've got Jaden Osberry, the fifth guy. He's really good in coverage, like really good. So much so that they cross-trained him at nickel for a few weeks because they didn't really know what they had at that position. It seems like they're doing that less and less now because Leonard Moore and Carson Hobbs, the freshman cornerbacks, are going to be able to play that position. But the fact that they even considered it, the fact that they would even spend practice reps on Jaden Osberry at nickel shows you that they believe very strongly in his ability to cover wide receivers, tight ends, running backs, whatever the case may be. So these guys all bring different things to the table. Also, a great benefit of rotating 5 guys is you're going to have fresh legs out there more often than not. You can throw a bunch of guys out there. You move them around. The offense is not going to be able to predict where they're coming. And when they're on the field and they're making plays, they're going to have a lot more energy because they're not going to be out there every single play taking a beating like linebackers often do. And then this is also going to bode well for the, what we expect will be a longer season for Notre Dame because they're not going to be playing 80 snaps a game. So they're going to have fresher legs at the end of the season as well. That's going to be important. But I do think that for as great as it is that these guys are going to have more energy, I do think it takes away from their ability to get into a rhythm. I don't think that's going to be the case for Jack Kaiser. Like I said, he's going to be out there. But when you're a guy like Jaden Osberry or maybe KVA or Jake Bowen, when you're coming in, you're playing 2 plays and then you come out and maybe you don't get in for another couple of series, I do think that takes a toll on these guys because people don't often affiliate linebacker with a position that needs rhythm, but I think it does because when you're out there and you're on defense, you're in a groove and you're making plays, I think you just kind of get in the flow of the game. It's easier to make tackles. It's easier to anticipate what you're seeing and sort of predict where the offense is going to go before it even happens. So that's one downside to this rotation, but overall, I think it's going to be a net positive for this defense. But for as much as they're going to rotate, ultimately, this group is going to depend on Jack Kaiser and Jalen Snead most of all. Jack Kaiser's been one of Notre Dame's most efficient defenders for the past 3 seasons. Last year, in 2023, he was 3rd on the team in tackles, but 12th on the defense in snaps. But if you look at his PFF grade, he actually had the highest grade of any defensive player last season. I understand PFF grades are, they're not always the most reliable thing in the world, but still, I do think that it's important that he was graded that high. Like, that wasn't an accident, right? 2022, Kaiser was 2nd on the team in tackles and 15th on the defense in snaps. Going back to 2021, which seems like an eternity ago, he was 6th on the team in tackles, but had 2 pick sixes that season and was 13th on the defense in snaps. So when he's out there, he just makes plays. He's always been able to do that, and now he's going to be on the field a hell of a lot more than he's been in recent years because he is the guy at the linebacker position. He's the oldest guy. He's the best player. He's going to be on the field more than anyone else. But I do think it's fair to ask, if he was so efficient, why didn't he play more? He played rover for the past few years, which is the strong side linebacker position. And that was sort of the odd man out whenever Notre Dame ran nickel. They would bring him out, keep the Mike and Will Linebacker, the weak side linebacker, on the field at the same time. And now that's the position that Jack Kaiser is going to mostly play, the weak side linebacker. That's where Maris Leofau played these past few seasons. And I think that Jack Kaiser is going to be asked to play inside a little bit more. He's going to be able to come in and play that Mike linebacker spot, which, to be honest with you, was not one of his strengths in the past, but now that he's had a full offseason to bulk up and prepare to play more inside, I think it's going to bode well for him because in the past, he didn't really have the frame to do so. Now it's a little bit different because, like I said, he is that guy. He's going to be asked to do these different things. I'm really excited to see what Jack Kaiser can do with this opportunity. Like I said, he's a 6-year guy. He's the guy now. And he even admitted that his versatility sort of came back to bite him in the past because he's so versatile in everything that he can do, so they could put him in a bunch of different places. But then again, he wasn't great at one specific thing, and they had a guy better than him to bring them out on the field. So he's still very versatile, but I think that his role is going to be a lot more defined this year. If he's not voted as a team captain, I will be surprised. He's certainly going to be the captain of the defense when he's out there. His value goes well beyond the stat sheet, but as he's shown, he can fill it up there as well. I think it's fair to wonder if he's going to be able to maintain that same level of productivity on a snap-to-snap basis with so many more snaps, but either way, he has earned the opportunity to try, and I think that overall, even if he takes a dip in his play efficiency, he's still going to be an extremely productive player for the Irish. And then there's Jalen Snead, who I believe is the X factor in this room and arguably the entire defense because he's got so many elite athletic traits, and the hype started building around him in the spring. Now it's full go. Like, Max Bullough was so complimentary of him that it genuinely shocked me, because Max Bullough is not a guy who throws around compliments that often. This is what Max Bullough had to say about Snead. Quote, "I can't talk enough about how far Jalen Snead has come from year one to right now. If there was one person I'd say I can't be prouder of from when I got here to right now, it's number 3. It's number 3, and he is going to have a big year." End quote. I'll admit, I was a little skeptical in the spring of all the Jalen Snead hype. I'm like, all right, are we just kind of speaking this into existence because he was the 5-star recruit coming out of high school? After hearing that, and after hearing some of the stuff that he's been doing in practice, I think it is legit. Like I said, he's an elite athlete. There are several games this season where he's going to be the best athlete on the entire field. Offense, defense, it doesn't matter. He's got a great vertical. He's extremely fast in the open space. But sometimes in the past, that has actually come back to bite him because he's taken bad pursuit angles, or he's just blown by a running back and then missed a tackle. He did that in the past. I think he has a much better grasp on what he needs to do on a down-to-down basis, and that is why he's going to have a much better year than he's ever had in college. Also, his weight is where it needs to be. When he started out in college, he wasn't even 200 pounds. Like, that's really small for a linebacker. Now, he's playing at 225 very consistently. Like I said, he has more of a grasp on the fundamentals and the technique. And last year, Snead was Kaiser's backup at Rover, but now he's technically the starting Rover. But considering this is his third year, he's also going to be able to move around the field a little bit. And I think that when Notre Dame goes into nickel and there's only 2 linebackers on the field, I think it's going to be Jack Kaiser and Jalen Snead. Even though neither one of those guys play the mic, I think that they just bring so much to the table. Also, as I said earlier, Jalen Snead is so good at getting after the quarterback. They can bring him in, and he can play off the edge. And then in which case, Notre Dame could be running like a 3-3-5, which is a little bit different than what they've run in the past. But given Snead's skill set, he can do so many different things for the defense, and he's such a fun little chess piece for Al Golden and Max Bullough to have because he has so many different things that he can do. Also, he can cover guys, which is not something he was able to do in the past. As a matter of fact, he was very honest about the fact that he could not cover when he started out in college. Now he can do that, and he can cover elite athletes out in space, make some plays in the open field. And from the outside, when you look at Jalen Snead and his career arc, I think it's very similar to Chase Claypool's. Chase Claypool had a ton of hype coming out of high school, had all the physical gifts in the world, but mentally wasn't really locked in, wasn't really mature enough yet. Then he matured, at least to some extent, and then dominated during his last year in college. It took Claypool until his senior year to really dominate, but you started to see the signs when he was a junior back in 2018. I think that Jalen Snead could have a better junior year than Chase Claypool did in his junior season because I think he's a little bit more ahead in his development and his maturity. And I really think that we're going to see him put it all together this year. It's going to be really, really fun. Crazy take about Jalen Snead that maybe will come back to haunt me, but I really think that if Jalen Snead starts to play to his full potential this season, then this might be the last season he plays at Notre Dame because he could be drafted high in the NFL draft because I said he's got all the tools, all the athleticism. He would blow people away at the combine. So now if he's able to take that, put it on the field, put it on film, make some plays on a game-to-game basis, the sky's the limit for this kid. I'm really, really excited about what he can do. Again, I understand it's a long shot, but I'm telling you, that is how gifted of a player he is, and that is how high the ceiling is for a guy like Jalen Snead. All right, we know the vets aren't going to be the only guys contributing on this defense, so when we come back, we're going to take a look at the young linebackers who are ready for their time to shine. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. And with great last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. Whether you've been planning to go to a game for weeks, or if you're feeling spontaneous and you're like, you know what, I want to hit up the nearby ballpark, Gametime is the perfect place for you. I actually went to a Dodgers-Phillies game last week. It was an awesome time. Wasn't even really planning on going. Then I looked at the price on Gametime. I was like, you know what? I could see Bryce Harper, Shohei Ohtani play some baseball tonight for cheap. I went, had a great time. All thanks to Gametime. It's the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind. With your purchase, you can see the view from your seat on your phone before you buy. But my favorite thing about Gametime is the pricing shows your total cost up front, and you can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, let's take a look at the young guys, because even though I think that Kaiser and Snead are the most important linebackers on the team, the young players like Drake Bowen, KVA, and Jane Osberry can elevate the group to another level if they excel in their role. And each one of these guys is definitely going to have a role on this defense. So let's start off with Drake Bowen. He looks like he's going to be the starting Mike linebacker. And even though he's only going to be a redshirt freshman, it feels like he's been around Notre Dame a lot longer, because he committed to Notre Dame way back in November of 2021, and he's in the class of 2023. He immediately became the vocal leader in that class because he's from nearby Maryville, Indiana. He visited Notre Dame's campus like 100,000 times when he was a recruit. It seemed like he just lived there, to be honest. He was at every game. He was at every practice. He was just always around the program, very vocal in his support about Notre Dame. He was the recruit that was recruiting other recruits, and he was such a fixture in this class. And it's why that so many fans love him and want him to succeed, because he is just so bought in to everything that Notre Dame is and everything that they have to offer. He was also a very highly rated prospect coming out of high school, and I think that people forget that a little bit just because I honestly don't even know. Maybe it's because Kingston Viliamu-Asa, the hype around him, and trust me, I'm going to get to him. I love him as a player, but Bowen was ranked just outside the top 100 players nationally on the 24/7 Sports Composite in the class of 2023. He was the number 8 linebacker in the class overall. So some fans might have forgotten about him, but now he's got a real chance to play as a redshirt freshman. That is not by accident. And by all accounts, he was a sponge last year. He didn't play much at all, but he was constantly looking to learn and develop as a player. He followed J.D. Bertrand around, which is great because J.D. Bertrand is just a wealth of knowledge. And one of the reasons why he was so good is because he was a sponge, learned the playbook, learned from other greats, and became such a good player in college. I think that J.D. Bertrand is one of those guys who absolutely maxed out their ability during their time as a college football player. And it seems like Drake Bowen is on a similar track. As a matter of fact, last year, J.D. Bertrand shouted out Drake Bowen as one of the most impressive young guys on the entire team for his willingness to learn, get better, do the little things, learn the routine, all of that. So now Drake Bowen is going to have a chance to showcase what he learned during that redshirt season and then apply it on the field. Like J.D. Bertrand, I think Drake Bowen is a perfect fit for Notre Dame, not just because he's bought into the university and everything that it has to offer, but he's very smart. He has willingness to learn. And in Al Golden's defense, you have to have really smart linebackers because this is a very advanced scheme. It's an NFL system, and the linebackers are asked to do a lot. They have to understand a lot of what's going on around them. They have to make checks. Little things that might not seem like a lot could affect the entire defense, and he has to be able to recognize that and then vocalize that to the rest of the group. And Max Bulla, linebackers coach, actually made a point to sort of call out Drake Bowen and the need for him to be a more vocal leader on the defense because, to be honest with you, just in the interviews that I've seen with Drake Bowen and just what he said at press conferences, I don't think he's a really loud-spoken guy, but you kind of have to be if you're a linebacker because you have to call out the defense, get other guys aligned, and make sure that they are where they need to be. And also, you just have to be a leader and get those guys pumped up and ready to go. That might not be his personality now, but it needs to be in order for him to be a great college linebacker. I do think that he took that to heart, and he has improved upon that so far in fall camp. He's got the size to be really good. He's 6'2", 239 pounds. He's a really good athlete. Also plays on the Notre Dame baseball team, so that tells you he can move around. He can do different things on different fields. So I do have my questions about whether or not Drake Bowen is like the playmaker that a guy like Kingston Viliamu-Asa is or Jane Osberry. But still, when you just want like a football player, a true Mike linebacker in the modern era of football, someone who can get in there, make some plays in the run game, but also someone who can move around in coverage, I think Drake Bowen is that type of guy. And even though Kingston Viliamu-Asa and the hype around him is sort of like made some fans forget about Drake, don't get me wrong, he is absolutely going to be a fixture on this defense. All right, now let's talk about KVA. I'm so excited to watch him. Like, just so excited to make him, or to watch him make his college debut. I mentioned there's a lot of hype around him, and there has been a lot of hype around KVA since he was a sophomore, or really, no, a freshman at St. John Bosco High School out here in Southern California, one of the best high school football programs in the entire country. They produce DJ Uiagalelei, some other really good players, and every single year they play a national schedule. They've won the national championship before, and Kingston Viliamu-Asa was playing for that team as a true freshman. That is how good he is. And it's kind of funny because there's so much hype around him, but it kind of contradicts his personality because he's a very mild-mannered kid, seems very quiet. And when he committed, a lot of people compared him to Manti Te'o. It seems crazy, but there are some similarities there. And even though I think KVA is going to be great, I don't think he is quite the type of player that Manti Te'o was, and that's okay. Those are really high expectations. That being said, I don't think it's unrealistic to think that KVA could end up having a freshman season like Manti Te'o did. And Manti Te'o's impact, as we know, went far beyond the football field. That's why I think it's unfair to equate KVA to Manti Te'o. There's a good chance that KVA could develop into a first-round NFL draft pick, which is something that Manti Te'o wasn't. But still, different players, different personalities. When KVA was coming out of high school, he was one of the very best players in his entire recruiting class. Notre Dame was in an absolute dogfight to get him. And as a matter of fact, it surprised a lot of people when he committed to Notre Dame because a lot of people thought that he would end up at Ohio State. Didn't happen. Notre Dame got him over Ohio State and the hometown USC as well. He was an early enrollee, made a ton of plays in spring practice, and seemed to really pick up the playbook quickly because that's something that's very difficult for these young Mike linebackers to do because for all the reasons that I said, Drake Bowen is going to be really good. Like, he already has a year in this scheme under his belt. Kingston Viliamu-Asa only has about 7 months, but it seems like he's come a really long way. To be honest, I think Notre Dame is going to use KVA the most in blitz packages. It seems like that is something that he has shown to be really effective at ever since the moment that he stepped on campus. Yes, he can cover. He made a great play in coverage in the spring game when he was like 20 yards down the field covering Jaden Greathouse. It was one of those plays that made you go, whoa. That's great that he did that in the spring game. I don't think he's going to be asked to do that a ton this season. I could be proven wrong, but right now I think that they're going to try to ease him into it a little bit in terms of what he's being asked to do. But he can really get after the passer, especially on the inside. He can come off the edge. He can surprise the defense. I think that he is a great asset for this defense, and he's going to be great in third down situations. I will say, for as much hype as there is around him and for as high as my expectations are for KVA, he is young. He is going to make mistakes this year. When you play a true freshman, Mike linebacker, they are going to make mistakes. I know that some fans don't want to hear it, but that is just the reality of the situation. But I do think that the transition for KVA is going to be easier than most because of the program he played for when he was in high school. He's also physically ready to go. Marcus Freeman said as much on National Signing Day when they were asked, okay, which one of these guys is most ready to contribute right away? The very first person Marcus Freeman mentioned was Kingston Viliamu-Asa. The interesting thing about him, though, is that he's been the best player on literally every field he's played on, basically, for his entire life, right? He was always the best athlete, always one of the biggest guys, could play offense, defense. It didn't really matter. There are not many freshmen who are going to be playing on St. John Bosco. He did just that. So I don't think confidence is going to be an issue for him at all because he's had every reason to be confident throughout his entire life, and the fact that he's even going to have the opportunity to play this year as a true freshman linebacker tells you everything you need to know about his ability. So I think with that, the coaching staff is going to trust him because even when he makes those mistakes, he's not going to waver. He knows how good of a player he can be, and there's a chance that he ends up becoming the starting Mike linebacker halfway through the season. I don't think it's going to happen right away. I think that Drake Bowen is going to be the starter at Mike to start the year, but if KVA does end up earning that job, similar to how Manti Te'o did in his freshman season when he earned it about halfway through the year, I think he could end up putting up similar numbers. Te'o in 2009 had 63 total tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss, and a sack. If KVA can get anywhere close to that, that would be one hell of a freshman season from the Southern California product. Okay, lastly, Jane Osberry. The other guy, the fifth guy in the rotation, although he's also a very, very compelling player. He might be the most versatile out of any of these guys outside of Jack Kaiser. People were raving about him in spring practice last season in 2023, but he barely played last year because of the older guys in front of him. Totally understandable. Also, he is a true rover, and as I mentioned with Kaiser, that is the odd man out when Notre Dame runs in nickel. Osberry can cover. He can blitz. He can make plays in the run game. He was so good at coverage that he played nickel, as I mentioned earlier. But fortunately for him, the linebackers, he doesn't have to do that anymore. He can put all of his focus on playing linebacker and being the best rover that he can be. But my concern about Jane Osberry is that he might deal with some of the same problems that Jack Kaiser had to deal with because he was so versatile. Like, that's great that he can play all these different positions, but I do think that, especially for a young player like Osberry, it's beneficial to just really key in on one spot and play as many reps as you can there and master that position before you move elsewhere. I don't know how they're going to utilize Jane Osberry, to be honest with you. It's one of the most interesting things about this entire unit because we don't really know what position he is. Like, we know he's a rover, right? But if the rover is going to be off the field a lot, and when the rover is out there, the starting linebacker or the starting rover is going to be Jalen Sneed, like, where does that leave Osberry? Well, Marcus Freeman also said that he is a guy that you need to get on the field because he just makes plays. It's a good problem to have if you're Max Bullough trying to figure out a way to get a guy like Jane Osberry, who is so talented, on the field. But I do think that he might be like the odd man out in this rotation. I think he's going to be very effective in third down, obvious passing situations because he can cover, because he can surprise the defense and blitz you. But I don't really know what to expect from him this season because I think the coaching staff is going to kind of, try and figure things out on the fly. What his role is at the start of the season is probably not what it's going to be at the end of the season. My guess for him is that it's going to start off a little slow. He's going to be out there sparingly, especially in the big game like Texas A&M. Are they really going to put him out there that much? That remains to be seen, but I still think that he has a ton of potential and could end up having a very good season for the Irish once he figures out his role and once he sort of gets his feet wet out there and starts making some plays. Then they have a true five-man rotation, and then the reps could be distributed pretty evenly. But again, all of that is going to be determined as the season goes along. There's a lot of young guys, a lot of inexperienced guys out there. They're going to make mistakes, but they're also going to make some plays that make you go, wow. And the future is really, really bright at the position because of it. All right, coming up in segment 3, what is the development of Notre Dame's young linebackers going to tell us about the staff's ability to evaluate and develop? All right, I spent a lot of time talking about the main 5 guys who are going to be rotating, but they are not the only linebackers on the roster. There's guys like Preston Zinter, Bodie Cajon, and Teddy Rizak, and they're very interesting as well for different reasons. Preston Zinter was in the same class as Drake Bowen and Jane Osberry. He was the other redshirt freshman, but he was a low 4-star recruit, didn't have the same fanfare as the other guys. But I think he's going to be a good player on special teams. He would probably be a bigger contributor on other teams around college football. Unfortunately for him, he's down on the depth chart, but still, he's going to bring some things to this Notre Dame team this year. I hope he sticks around because I think that he's one of those guys that in time could develop into a really good player. But I really want to talk about Bodie Cajon and Teddy Rizak real quick because they were the 3-star linebackers in the class of 2024. Both these guys are almost certainly going to redshirt this season. And I'll just be completely honest with you. I did not know why Teddy Rizak was a take in the most recent recruiting class. I understand he's tall, I understand he's long, but he's also very skinny, and he is the lowest ranked prospect in the entire class by a lot. Okay, he also plays in Nebraska, and it didn't seem like his league was super competitive, but they also took his brother as a preferred walk-on quarterback. So clearly, the staff saw something in the Rizak family that they were willing to take not one, but 2 of them in this class. Now, granted, only one was on scholarship, but still, they liked this family a lot. Bodie Cajon, he was not quite as lowly recruited as Teddy Rizak. I think he was like around like the 500th ranked player nationally, but still, that was pretty low. And Notre Dame took these guys very early on in the process. It wasn't like they're coming to the end and they were getting close to signing day and they just needed a couple guys in this class. No, they took them early on. I think a lot of people were like, wait, why are they taking these guys this early? Remains to be seen. Clearly, they see something in these players that a lot of us on the outside do not. And look, for as much talk as there was about these guys when they were recruits, it doesn't matter anymore because now they're on the Notre Dame football team, and now we have to root for these guys to be really good, and maybe they will be. I do think it's going to be quite a while before we see them touch the field. I mean, maybe they make some plays on special teams or something like that. Maybe Bodie Cajon does it. I don't think Rizak is going to play much at all this season. But I'm really intrigued to hear how they do on the scout team. They have a lot of work to do physically in the weight room to get ready to be college football linebackers. But if they end up being good players and they develop and they end up being diamonds in the rough, and then we look back on their time as recruits and then we all look like idiots, like that's more than fine with me. I'm happy to be wrong about Cajon and Rizak in this class. I remember when they got KVA to commit, 1, it was a surprise, like I alluded to earlier, but 2 is like, wow, okay, this linebacker class isn't a complete bust. They have 1 star in this group that can contribute very early on, which will allow time for guys like Rizak and Cajon to develop. If they don't end up developing, if they end up being bust, they end up being just exactly what some fans thought they would be coming out of high school, then I think it's fair to question the coaching staff in their evaluation of these recruits. Sometimes you find diamonds in the rough. I mean, I would consider Benjamin Morrison a diamond in the rough because he was not ranked in the top 300 nationally. But Mike Mickens saw something, worked really, really hard to get him over Washington, and obviously we saw how that turned out. But that's Mike Mickens. That's a different position. Linebacker spot is a little bit different. Notre Dame had James Laurinaitis there as the coach. He's now the linebackers coach at Ohio State. They promoted Max Bulla from a GA to linebackers coach, even though he was basically the linebackers coach last year. And it is going to be a very interesting thing to watch because right now in the class of 2025, Notre Dame is in the running for Man Framo and Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, two elite linebackers. They also got a commitment from Anthony Sacco, who I really like. He's a really good outside linebacker, so he's not quite as much of a developmental guy as Kahon and Rizak, but still, there's a lot of questions about the linebacker spot because Marcus Freeman was a linebacker. When he first came in, they signed a really great haul, but then they moved Tuialamaka and they moved Josh Burnham to the defensive line, and then Nolan Ziegler left the program. So the linebacker recruiting has been a bit of a question lately. They got KVA. That was great. Other than him, it's been a lot of developmental guys. So it's going to be interesting to watch how these guys develop because if they end up being good, I think the fan base is going to just trust the coaching staff in their evaluation of these guys. But if they don't, it's fair to question, hey, what are we doing at this position and why are they struggling to recruit really talented players? Because Notre Dame has had really productive linebackers over the past few years. I mean, Teo, Jalen Smith, J.D. Bertrand and Maris Leofau were not either one of those guys, but they both got drafted in the NFL. So hopefully that starts to translate to more success on the recruiting trail. Again, if they get Man Framo and they get Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, this is kind of a moot point. But it's something interesting that I'm going to be following throughout this season and beyond as we follow the development of Rizak and Cone. Also got to mention, as we finish up here with the linebackers, Kahanu Kia, he's out for the season. Tore his ACL during the summer. Bummer for him because he has not been a part of the football program the past 2 years while he was doing his mission trip, and it seemed like he could be an impact player on special teams. He actually led the spring game with most tackles, and I thought he might be a rotation piece, but he's going to have to sit out another year and wait to start his college career. So it means when he is a freshman next year, he's going to be the same age as most of the seniors in his class, which is kind of crazy, but hey, it happens with some schools like BYU, even Utah a little bit, and it's going to be a really interesting career arc because like when he's actually a senior, is he going to be like my age? That seems crazy, but it's a possibility for Kahanu Kia. Overall, really, really excited about the linebackers this year. There are going to be times when they make mistakes. There's times where they're going to be the best players on the field, and it is going to be so fun to watch these guys finally get out there, make some plays. Because, like, how long have we been hearing about these young linebackers and the strides they've been making in practice? Well, now we're going to see it on the field on Saturdays, and sometimes it might give us a heart attack, but I think overall we are going to be really, really pleased with what this group does in 2024. All right, that is a wrap for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. I'm going to be right back here tomorrow morning, but for your second listen of the day, check out the Locked On College Football Podcast with Spencer McLaughlin. In the meantime, remember to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast, and I'll see you all tomorrow.